we've actually seen just recently sort of the collapse of using ballistics matching in court. At least the scientific backing of that has been drawn into serious question. You wrote about this at the Daily Beast earlier this year. Can you talk a little bit about that issue as well?
Right. Yeah. So for a long time, the FBI has claimed, and then other ballistics experts, particularly those trained by the FBI, have claimed that they can take a gun found at a bullet found at a crime scene and match it to a specific gun based on the markings on the bullet that are left by the barrel of the gun. And for years, decades really, they've claimed to be able to match a specific bullet to a specific gun and claim on the witness stand that this gun and only this gun could have fired this bullet because of these marks, which can often be microscopic. And it's always been suspect because anytime you're going to make a claim like that, you have to know the frequency with which those marks are going to occur in the entire population of all bullets fired by all guns, right? So if you look at DNA, for example, which is a forensic technology that actually came from science and wasn't developed in a police setting or law enforcement setting. With DNA, when it comes to DNA markers, we know how frequently each DNA marker occurs in the entire human population. And so when a DNA expert testifies on the stand, you'll rarely hear a DNA expert say, this blood could only have come from this person. What they'll say is, this blood contains these markers. This person has these markers. Here's how often those markers occur in the human population. Therefore, the odds of the blood coming from anyone but this person are 1 in 6.2 billion, right? Well, you can't do that with ballistics because we don't know how many guns could have possibly created these marks on this particular bullet. There's just no way to know that. You can't. And there are people who are actually trying to put databases together to get a better estimate on this, but they're finding it very difficult. What you might be able to do is you might be able to say, there's no way that this gun could have fired this bullet. You can exclude a gun as the source of the marks on a particular bullet, but to say that these marks could only be caused by this gun to the exclusion of all other guns on the planet, there's just no scientific evidence for that. And the scientific research that has been done has said that it's just not a conclusion you can make. And so what's happened is
it's interesting because it's it feels very much out of CSI, right? That's a very common trope on that show. Which is a very popular show. But it always seemed like kind of a stretch if you think about it, because one, the bullets are mass produced, right? The guns are mass produced in almost every situation. Now there may be, like you said, you can eliminate based on caliber, based on perhaps the way the barrel twists in some cases. If you have a strange gun that has a twist that goes left instead of right, or the traditional rifling methods, there's some things where, like you said, you could eliminate certain guns, or you could at least narrow it down to this model of gun. But matching perfectly the bullet, and especially considering what a bullet does, what happens to a bullet after it's fired,
after it leaves the gun.
I mean, there's it always seemed like a pretty big stretch. Like you could exactly match this bullet to that exact one of 10 million, Glock 19s that have been produced. It's so it's interesting to see that. One, that it's been so widely accepted. This is something you write about a lot. It's sort of pseudoscience that's commonly used in criminal cases. Is even when it's not really commonly used in civil cases because it's not reliable, you'll still see it used in criminal cases. And this is something that obviously has directly to do with firearms, which is what we talk about. And I think it's fascinating. And now you're seeing a big pushback to it, right?
Well, so there's been a pushback in the scientific community and with, sort of the criminal justice reform community. Ballistics matching is part of this field of forensics called pattern matching. And it's includes, bite marks. It includes shoe prints, tire tread. And it all involves basically, there's no kind of computer that, like you see on CSI, that sort of, matches things up perfectly. Right. You get that with fingerprinting, although partial prints are still problematic. But most of the time, it's an expert looking at two things, sometimes under a microscope, and just sort of eyeballing it. and deciding whether or not it's a match or
Right.
not. And that in itself is problematic. How much information they were given about the broader crime, you can have cognitive bias creep into how they're doing the matching. There have been proficiency tests given to ballistic experts about where we know the answer, and they don't. It's often no better than a coin flip. The results of those
Yeah,
proficiency
but these
tests,
are still
and
used today, right? A lot of this evidence is still
so
being used,
that's
even with this pushback.
that's what this article was about, was that a few judges here and there are now starting to push back a little bit, and it's the most sort of faint and sort of lukewarm of pushback. Basically, they're telling these experts, you can say that this gun could have fired this bullet. You can say, I can't exclude this gun. All they're saying is you can't say that this gun and only this gun, to the exclusion of all other guns on the planet, is the only gun that could have fired this bullet. And it's driving the ballistics people crazy that they're not allowed to
Hmm.
say that. And so what I wrote about was this memo that we got from the director, or the attorney, the counsel for the crime lab of the FBI, who's basically advising ballistics experts on how to get around judges who are trying to limit their testimony in that very sort of narrow way. But even that is they're taking offense to the idea that they should be limited at all in what they can tell
Right.
juries.
Well, people should absolutely go and check that piece out over at the Daily Beast, and your other piece at the Post, and also if they're interested in your book, which you said was just reissued last year, just updated. Where can they find that?
Anywhere, Rise of the Warrior Cop is what it's called. And yeah, we added a few 3 chapters, and I rewrote the introduction and the conclusion to sort of take the narrative up through uh, basically January of 2020. So it's pretty updated now. And yeah, any place you get books, it should be there, hopefully.